Number 1. I was visiting my girlfriend several hours northwest of Montreal, and the weekend was over, so I set out driving south on Autoroute 117 from Val d'Or in Quebec at about 2 AM on a Monday morning. Anyone who has driven the road knows just how bare it is and how isolated you are. It's not abnormal to speed excessively as there are very few police officers, no gas stations for a 190-mile stretch, and emergency SOS phones every dozen miles or so. As I mentioned, it was 2 AM and I was blasting down the highway pushing my rental 2014 Hyundai Sonata to its limit. I had downed 2 monsters and half a gallon of water needed 2 hours earlier, and well, to ensure I stayed awake, I held off from a bathroom break until I finally needed one. Keeping my eye for any roads or trails, I kept spotting flashes of lights in the woods. It was a clear night with a full moon, so I just kept telling myself they were probably just highway markers set too close together, and that if I pull over, there'd be no worries. After a good 20 minutes of stammering around, trying not to soil the seat of the Sonata I was confined to for 6 more hours, I slammed on the brakes. A single dirt road, barely wide enough for an Avio, but I decided to give it a shot. I was desperate. Rather than just stopping on the bare highway and doing my business, I pulled in and started to go through the trail, thanking myself for choosing the full coverage, non-fault insurance as the bushes scraped and thwarted the sides of the car, and the bottom occasionally getting caught on a rock. After a few minutes, some fog started to set in and the trail had gotten wider but muddier. I hit the gas and go through a half-foot deep mud pit and found a spot where I could stop and then turn around. I then got out, holding myself between the legs, leaving the car door open and fighting off the bugs to keep pee across the trail. Oh my god, just fuck yes. It was the best feeling in the world. I was overcome with glee and relief. But then, I hear a thud. Midstream, my car door had closed. It couldn't have just been nothing as I climbed up the bank to park, so the door was held open by the gravity, but I shrugged my shoulders and told myself it was the wind, even though there was none. I reached in my pocket to double check I had the key fob, which I did, and my cell phone as well. And for some reason, I started to feel tingling on the back of my neck, and I looked up. More road markers, but on the trail, in the fog, in the woods. There were eyes. First 1 pair, then 3. I zipped up and ran to the car. But the car was locked. I left it unlocked and the door wide open. What the fuck was happening? I turn around, and there are 3 wolves staring at me with my dress shirt sticking out of my fly. 2 terrifying things. 1. The wolves in front of me. 2. I just tore my Hugo Boss dress shirt. I clicked the key fob button in my pocket, unlocked the door, and calmly stepped in. Holy shit. Finally, some sheet metal between me and the wolves. I was sweaty. I dribbled on my work pants and tore my shirt. Great. At least I was safe. I then went to start the car. But it wouldn't start. Nothing. No turnover or anything. This was a brand new 2014 Sonata, and I was the first renter. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone after a few tries with nothing, and as I mentioned, there is no reception, no police, almost no traffic, and I'm in the middle of a friggin' ATV trail, and my car wouldn't start. What next? Bats. That's what. Fucking bats. There were fucking bats in the car. Now, I'm sitting in the car with my phone screen on, unable to call 911, and several bats flying around me and 3 wolves still outside my car staring at me make a fool of myself. Panicking, I decided to start swatting the bats. Have you ever swatted bats? This was a first for me, but man, it's disgusting. It's furry and greasy at the same time, and you feel their skin on yours too. Throw in the fact that they're trying to bite and scratch you, and they can practically see in the dark. After a well-fought battle, I got enough of them on the ground that I could try and start the car again. I inched my door open a crack, reclosed it to reset the lights, and tried the key again. It worked. Yes, home free. I shoved it into drive, turned the wheel left, honked at the wolves, and mashed it to get the car turned around. I started heading back down the trail, but suddenly, there is a half-dozen wolves chasing me from behind, and I opened the windows to get the bats out. I reached the highway with everything clamoring around, the car banging anything it could, and bats flying out the window. Too preoccupied with the pack of wolves chasing me, and bats still flying around, I didn't notice the semi-truck headed north, and flew right on the highway crossing his path, and I just missed getting hit by a mere few inches. I almost soiled the seat, again. I continued to drive south, fighting off the bats at around 30 miles an hour to get away from the wolves, and finally they were gone. I closed up the windows and sped up to a speed that isn't exactly legal, trying to catch my breath to make sense out of what just happened. For 5 hours, I drove in silence until I arrived at a parking lot near work in downtown Montreal. Blooded with bat shit on me, smelling like urine, a torn shirt still sticking through my fly, muddy dress shoes, exhausted and panicked, I walked into the office to start my Monday morning. Number 2. This incident happened to me back in 2013 when I was doing a 3-week trip from the capital of Kenya, Nairobi, to the eastern city of Kindu, the Democratic Republic of Congo. I apologize in advance if my English is not very good, as it's not my native tongue. So, while I have experienced many terrifying encounters on these roads, this one is by far the scariest and closest I've ever come to being killed. It was a Tuesday afternoon in the outskirts of the capital, and we were getting ready to start our journey. The route starts from Nairobi, Kenya, crosses into Tanzania, then Burundi, and finally the Congo. While the route is only 2,000 kilometers, the reason it takes 3 weeks is due to the fact that the roads are not maintained at all, and often terrible weather conditions means it's impossible to drive on them, as the rain creates several feet deep mud pits. Getting stuck in one of these mud traps means you may be stuck there for several days, as emergency SOS lines are non-existent in the vast East African terrain. So, we start our 3-week journey at around 11 AM. On this particular trip, I was delivering 14 people, 2 of whom were females, and the rest were males, along with 2 cows and many other stuff like sugar, rice and tea. This was good because in the event of heavy rainfall, if we ever get stuck, manpower is more important than anything. This is an almost identical truck to the one that I was driving. The 2 women were in the front section with me, while all the men were in the upper deck of the open-top trailer. The lower deck is for animals, and thankfully this time it was only 2 cows. Now, at this point, we were nearing the border with Tanzania, and the sun was a bright yellowish-orangey colour as it was starting to set. Bear in mind, during this entire trip, the maximum speed that I reach is around 50 miles an hour due to the awful roads. Each year, many trucks topple over, causing the death of many people. As we were cruising along at 30 miles an hour, me trying to chat up these lovely ladies, talking about some random stuff like politics, we suddenly see 2 lion cubs running on the road in front of us. So we slow down to about 10 miles per hour and trail behind them for a while. Now, this is a well-known trap in these parts of Kenya. Adult lionesses set their cubs to run in front of vehicles and then attack anyone on board if the truck stops. Of course, I don't stop and start pressing the horn. Suddenly, the mother of the cubs appears from the tallest grass of the Serengeti and starts running alongside the cubs while keeping an eye on us. We were slowing down substantially at this point, and some of the guys on the top trailer shout at me to speed up, while the women sitting next to me are telling me not to hit the cubs and their mother. At this point, I felt instability in the truck as it leaned from side to side. The sun is almost fully gone now, so I turn on the flashlights. Then, it hit me. The reason truck is tilting from side to side isn't the road. It's in fact the cows in the back moving around causing this, even though they're tied up. But the lioness and her cubs are about 25 meters in front of us and in clear view. So, there was no way the cows were scared of them, since they probably haven't seen the lioness and her cubs yet. Then, to my absolute horror, running along both sides of the truck were about 15 to 20 lions. This is why the cows were in so much distress. They spotted the lions first. So, here I was, 2 women screaming at me not to hit the cubs and their mother while I tried to speed up, totally oblivious to the terrifying number of lions running alongside us.
and the men upstairs telling me to speed up, as well as the 2 cows shuffling around causing the truck to sway from side to side. But more terrifyingly, the condition of the road starts deteriorating, meaning if I speed up too much, the truck will definitely topple over. And to make matters worse, I was the only one armed with an old rusty AK-47 that I haven't used for many months. I prayed to Jesus over and over again to keep us safe. This went on for another 20 or so minutes, the lions patiently running alongside us and occasionally jumping on the back to try and get to the cows. After what felt like forever, they gave up and the road starts to flatten out, allowing me to speed up to around 40 miles an hour. Now, I don't know why all these lions were so persistent over 2 cows, but my guess is that it was the dry season and most of their prey have migrated north, so they were probably very desperate. What's even more confusing is that lions never attack in groups. This was very strange. I thank the Lord and Saviour that nothing has happened to us, but had something gone wrong, like an engine failure or the truck toppling over, I'm sure the cows weren't the only ones those lions wanted to eat. Number 3. The creepiest I had was back in 2008 from Seattle to DC. The route was down to Portland, then 184 to 180 to 176 to 170, and then finally to 1270. Immediately heading out of Portland, I passed an old F100 going very slowly in primer black with no license plates. Cool truck, I thought, and didn't really pay it any mind. I noticed about an hour later that the same truck was a couple car lengths behind me. Odd. After getting back to some open roads, he disappeared into the distance behind me. First night, I stopped somewhere in Idaho, a shitty cheap local motel, and I'm the only one there. I wake up the next morning, and parked one spot away from me is that primed F100. I take off, continuing my trek southeast. Every single time I stop for gas, at a rest stop or get slowed down for traffic, the old Ford shows up in my rearview mirror again. It's bizarre. Nearing the end of Nebraska, I pull over and get gas and decide to drive one more tank then stop for the day. I pull back onto the highway, and the truck is right there shadowing me again. About 30 minutes later, I realize I'm too tired to get to the end of the tank and decide to stop in the next town, just over the border in Iowa. As I'm getting off, I see the pickup pass on carrying down the highway. I guess he's got more endurance than I do. I wake up the next morning. You know what's coming. The damn truck is in the hotel parking lot again. Up to this point, I just figured I was driving here to his daughter's and we just happened to be making the same west-east trip. Now, I had that weird light feeling in my stomach, like something was just off. I asked the clerk when turning in my keys what's up with the truck. When had it come in? She then says that she wasn't working last night and wasn't sure at all. At this point, I figure it must be a coincidence and that this has to be a very different truck. I mean, there were a lot of F100s made and there's bound to be a couple in the country that are primer black running with no plates. As I go to head out, I see the truck turning out of the parking lot in the direction that leads him away from the highway. It couldn't have been the same one from before. The guy didn't turn in his keys, so he was probably staying locally. So, I get back on the highway. No truck. I then run to the end of the tank stop and get gas and some snacks. I get back on, and I emerge in 2 cars in front of a primer black F100. What the hell is going on? At this point I decide, screw it, I am marathoning the rest of the way. It's less than 20 hours so it shouldn't be so bad, and I don't want to stay at another shitty motel with strange ghost trucks stalking me. The pan continues with the truck showing up behind me every single time I take a break, or get gas or get slowed down in traffic. It's dark when I get to the 170-270 split, and the old headlights are glowing back on the horizon. I know it's him. I wonder if he's going to follow me down 270 and be parked down the street near my house the next morning when I wake up. Alas, the truck continues on 70 and I never see it again. Looking back at it, it was probably a confluence or a coincidence. It still feels really odd to me though, because it's not like there were a lot of F100s doing interstate runs in 2008. I also realized that I never got a good look at the driver. Not that there was no driver, but in my memories, all I see is an indistinct human-shaped thing driving an old truck that stalked me for 3,000 miles. Number 4. My dad was in Albuquerque. He stopped for the night in a pawn shop parking lot. It was about 10:30 p.m. and his air compressor was empty. Earlier that night, he had rolled down the windows, but since the compressor was out, he couldn't roll them back up until it refilled. Anyway, he's getting ready for bed and a voice yells at him not to move. A female Puerto Rican tweaker jumped into the truck from the driver's side and pressed a gun to his head, ordering him to give all of his money and belongings of value. Unfortunately for her, my dad doesn't ever have cash on him, and the poor guy never buys himself anything expensive. He only had $60, a broken laptop, a cup of change, and his clothes as well as blankets and toiletries. Of course, he did have his debit card, credit card, and a T-check. They held him hostage in there for more than an hour as she unloaded everything from his cab and handed it to her 300-pound black male friends. According to my dad, homegirl was tripping balls the entire time. She ordered him to follow her to the ATM, but considering my dad owns his own business, it probably wouldn't have ended well had she seen his accounts. He decided he couldn't let it happen. After a few more minutes, she decided they were walking into the ATM. She had her friend on the passenger side help her down, according to my dad, ordering my dad to follow. As soon as she was clear off the door, he closed the door, locked it, and tried to honk the horn, but it hardly made an audible noise. Apparently, this was enough to send the trio running into the darkness with blankets in hand. Shaken, my dad called the police. Surprisingly, they had an amazing response. 15 to 20 patrol cars, a helicopter, dogs, etc. were there within 5 minutes. They caught 2 of them, but not the third one. I would also like to add a second story. My dad drives in Texas a lot as well, but there is a particular road he always avoids. I'm not sure what road it is, but he says it's in the middle of old Native American land. One night, as he was driving through, he kept seeing shadows running alongside his trailer. Every once in a while, he would hear a loud bang as if someone was slapping the side of the trailer. He decided to stop and see if a tire has blown up, because that's the only thing that could be making that noise. He did his usual walk around, checking the tires, but as he turned the corner, he heard a laugh and a shadow took off running down the road. Needless to say, he shat his pants, jumped in the truck, and didn't stop until daylight. Number 5. Many years ago, I was on what's called a meet and run. This is where a driver that is domiciled out of one city will drive a load halfway to its destination, while a driver domiciled out of that destination will drive halfway with the load that is destined for my city. So, this is how it works. We meet in a parking lot, switch trailers, and drive back home. Simple. I had been on this run for a few months and found that I always got to the meeting point about an hour before the other driver. It was a dark and empty dirt lot at about 3 a.m, so I would stretch out across the seat and take a short nap. One night, about 10 minutes into my nap, I was awoken by a barking dog. I tried to ignore it, but it carried on for several minutes and got louder as the dog got closer. Soon, it became apparent that the dog was right outside of my truck, barking at me. Okay, either this was Lacey and is trying to alert me to something, or else he's just a pain in the ass and I will need to throw something at him to scare him off. It is important to know that the barking had been going on for a good 10 minutes at this point. So, I sat up and looked out of my window. Standing there, mere inches away on the other side of the glass, was a man of about 35. He was a large fellow, and he was barking at me. His eyes were crazy, and he was frothing at the mouth a little. The scene really held my full attention for a moment. The sheer creepiness of this struck me. Gently, and making an absolute minimum of a sudden movement, I reached down and started my truck and slowly pulled away. Yes, he chased me, much like you might expect an angry dog to do, barking all the while. Needless to say, it played hell with my power naps from then on. Hey guys, it's the Grim Reader. So, I really hope you enjoyed that. If you did, don't forget to give it a like. And of course, subscribe for more videos like these. Also, why not check out my other videos? Once again, thanks a lot for watching, and stay tuned for more videos like these. Until then, have a wonderful time.
And then turn around. I then got out, holding myself between the legs, leaving the car door open and fighting off the bugs to keep pee across the trail. Oh my god, just fuck yes. It was the best feeling in the world. I was overcome with glee and relief. But then, I hear a thud. Midstream, my car door had closed. It couldn't have just been nothing as I climbed up the bank to park, so the door was held open by the gravity, but I shrugged my shoulders and told myself it was the wind, even though there was none. I reached in my pocket to double check I had the key fob, which I did, and my cell phone as well. And for some reason, I saw gas stations for a 190-mile stretch, and emergency SOS phones every dozen miles or so. As I mentioned, it was 2 AM and I was blasting down the highway pushing my rental 2014 Hyundai Sonata to its limit. I had downed 2 monsters and half a gallon of water needed 2 hours earlier, and well, to ensure I stayed awake, I held off from a bathroom break until I finally needed one. Keeping my eye for any roads or trails, I kept spotting flashes of lights in the woods. It was a clear night with a full moon, so I just kept telling myself they were probably just highway markers set too close together, and that if I pull over, there'd be no worries. After a good 20 minutes of stammering around, trying not to soil the seat of the Sonata I was confined to for 6 more hours, I slammed on the brakes. A single dirt road, barely wide enough for an Aveo, but I decided to give it a shot. I was desperate. Rather than just stopping on the bare highway and doing my business, I pulled in and started to go through the trail, thanking myself for choosing the full coverage, non-fault insurance as the bushes scraped and thwarted the side of the car, and the bottom occasionally getting caught on a rock. After a few minutes, some fog started to set in and the trail had gotten wider but muddier. I hit the gas and go through a half-foot deep mud pit and found a spot where I could stop. Started to feel tingling on the back of my neck, and I looked up. More road markers, but on the trail, in the fog, in the woods. There were eyes. First 1 pair, then 3. I zipped up and ran to the car. But the car was locked. I left it unlocked and the door wide open. What the fuck was happening? I turn around, and there are 3 wolves staring at me with my dress shirt sticking out of my fly. 2 terrifying things. 1. The wolves in front of me. 2. I just tore my Hugo Boss dress shirt. I clicked the key fob. Number 1. I was visiting my girlfriend several hours northwest of Montreal, and the weekend was over, so I set out driving south on autoroute 117 from Val d'Or in Quebec about 2 AM on a Monday morning. Anyone who has driven the road knows just how bare it is and how isolated you are. It's not abnormal to speed excessively as there are very few police officers.